Well, hello once again, everyone. What you see before you today is the C major scale. I'm going to talk about intervals today. And if you look at how I've got the C major scale set up, you'll notice I'm lopping off one pitch from the top of every time. So, do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. And the next measure it's re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. Mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. So forth and so on. And I'm doing that so we have some perspective on what's going on here. Intervals. When we're dealing with intervals, what that simply means is we're dealing with the distance between two pitches inclusive, which means we're counting those pitches amongst them. So I'm going to put the upper octave on each of these. So let me put both C's up there. We can take care of that as we go along here. If you look at what I've done here, I have put the upper octave above each note. And what this has done is created an interval. So you have the space between two notes. Now we know some of these. We've seen some of these before. Like B to C, we've called that a half step. Half step is also known as a minor second, and we'll fill in the gaps as we go along here. But all of the intervals that we see can be derived from what's going on here. For example, within this you'll have a perfect octave. And if these numbers don't mean anything, that's okay. Minor 7, minor 6th, perfect 5th, perfect 4th, minor 3rd, minor 2nd, and then if it's a unison we refer to as a perfect unison. I'm going to make one quick change here on the fly. And I'm going to add the full scale to this so we can see what's going on here. And then I'll revisit this and come back to it. If I do the same thing now, but instead of going from the beginning here, instead I build something like this, compare a couple things here, or if I hold the C constant down here on the bottom, so let's see what we get here. So this is also a perfect unison. This is a major second, a whole step, major 3rd, perfect 4th, perfect 5th, major 6th, major 7th, perfect octave. Now, you notice they're kind of mirrors of each other. When I have the top note stay constant, the intervals grow smaller as I get to the top of the scale. When I keep the bottom notes constant, the intervals get larger, and that makes a lot of sense. Let's zoom in on the half steps here. Minor second, B to C, it's a half step. Well, we also have the idea of the major second, the whole step, C to D. Any step where there's an intervening key between them, of course, would be a whole step. So we know steps, major seconds and minor seconds. A minor second is a half step, major second is a whole step. Any interval where there is, if they're both, like for example, the 3rd here, major 3rd, the C is on a ledger line, the E is on a line, if whatever the next adjacent of the same type of structure is. So major 3rd would be C to E. That's a 3rd, because if you count the gap there, C, D, E, 2 steps. So 1, 2, 3. Always start with your starting pitch. 1, 2, 3. That's a 3rd. It's a major 3rd because it's got 2 whole steps, C to D and D to E. And it's also got, if we want to keep track of it that way, 4 half steps. And we'll be going over in class a way to use half steps to show intervals. So major 3rd is 2 whole steps or 4 half steps. The minor 3rd, like we see here, A to C as an example, A up a whole step to B, and then B is a half step to C. So that's 3 half steps, or a step and a half. That's a minor 3rd. So major 3rd is 4 half steps or 2 whole steps. Minor third is 3 half steps or 1.5 whole steps. You'll notice both the fourths here, C, D, E, F, C up to F would cover the space of 4 notes. That's a perfect fourth, and then G to C is also a perfect fourth. Fourths are usually perfect. We'll look at a sheet here in a second that allows you to find the exceptions. Same fifths. C to G, 5 notes, C, D, E, F, G. So 5 notes inclusive. That's a perfect fifth. Same F to C. F, G, A, B, C, also a perfect fifth. Then we get larger here, major sixth, 2 whole steps, then a half step, then 2 more whole steps. In this case, we have a half step, 3 whole steps, and a half step, so total distance is shorter, but the space on the staff is the same. So we have a major sixth and a minor sixth, major seventh, minor seventh, and then the octave is always perfect. Now you'll notice that I use major and minor for some intervals and perfect for others. And the perfect intervals, or the intervals that can be perfect, are the unison, the fourth, the fifth, and the octave. And a lot of that goes back to ancient Greece when they were dividing the monochord. You know, if you have this string of length x, you put your finger down at the halfway point and pluck it, it's going to be an octave higher, and that's what we call a perfect octave. There is no such thing as a major or minor octave. There is no such thing as a major or minor fourth or fifth or unison. Those intervals are perfect, or they are not. They would be augmented or diminished, but you would never have an M4 or an M5 or an M8 or an M1. Likewise, you would never have a perfect second, third, sixth, or seventh. It would always be major or minor. So it's interesting to see the interaction there. What if I did something like this? Let's go down. I'm going to add the extra note here. So I decided to change this on the fly here. Well, we know it, like C to D is already a major second. We've got that. What if we started on D and just built that way? So let's take a look at how that might work here. What intervals are created? Well, we know if D stays on D, that's going to be a perfect unison. D to E is what kind of step? Half step or whole step? That's right, it's a whole step, and whole steps are by definition major seconds. Now, how far is D to F? Well, you go up a step to get from D to E, so that's a whole step, 2 half steps, and then E to F is a half step. So you've got a major second plus a minor second, and as we saw in this earlier example, that's a minor third. So we have something interesting going on here. D to G is what? Well, it's a fourth, but what kind of fourth? Most of your fourths are going to be perfect. Ditto most of your fifths. Now we get to sixths. We didn't talk about sixths a minute ago, so let's talk about sixths and sevenths now. D to B, Ray T, if you're keeping score at the home game. What kind of sixth is that? Well, let's take a look here. D to E is a whole step, then E to F is a half step. So we've gone up a step and a half, then a whole step to G, so 2.5 steps. Whole step to A, 3.5 steps. Whole step to B, 4.5 steps. That 4.5 steps, or a grand total of 9 half steps, is a major sixth. And we can confirm that if we look at C to A here. C to D is a whole step. D to E is a whole step, so that's 2 whole steps. E to F is a half step, so 2.5 steps. F to G is a whole step, 3.5. G to A, 4.5. We're basically, if we transpose this up a step, which is what we did here, we transpose both pitches the same distance. C went up a whole step, A went up a whole step. So if C to A is a major sixth, D to B is a major sixth. And then the seventh, let's take a look at things. If we look at this major seventh here, we know 4.5 whole steps makes a major sixth. 5.5 whole steps presented this way makes a major seventh, because A to B is a whole step. So how far do we transpose to get from C to D? That's a whole step. How far up is B to C? That's a half step. That's unequal. So we end up calling that a minor seventh, because the distance between D to C is a half step shorter than the distance between C to B. So when we build off of D, we get this. Now we'll assume that starting points are all unisons from this point, so we can just do it this way. As to what kind of sixths, sevenths, anything we might have here. In this case, so we're just assuming the unison, so E to F is what kind of second? That's right, it's a minor second. How about E to G? Well, E to F is a half step, F to G is a whole step, step and a half. That means it's going to be a minor third. You can compare back to this minor third. D to E is a whole step, F to G is a whole step. We took an interval, moved both parts of it the same distance. So that's how that worked. E to A, default position of 2.5 steps, is a perfect fourth. E to B, 3.5 steps, default position is a perfect fifth. And then E to C, well, we saw it earlier, is listed as a minor sixth, because then you have half step plus a whole step, 2 whole steps, 3 whole steps is 3.5 steps, 4.5 steps, plus the half step from B to C, so it ends up being a grand total of 5 whole steps. But it's laid out not always just straight up 5 whole steps. But that's a minor sixth, because a major sixth would have 5.5 steps. And this is just simply 5 steps. All right, so continuing on here. Something interesting starts to happen as we look at these last couple ones here. In this case, F to G is how far? Sorry, major second. F to A, 2 whole steps, so it's a, that's right, major third. F to B, how far is that? That's 3 whole steps. Let's compare it to our other perfect fourths here. D to E was a whole step, E to F was a half step, F to G was a whole step. Its perfect fourth is 2.5 steps. This is 3 steps. So we've taken a perfect interval and make it larger. We have augmented it. So we'll call that an augmented fourth, and the symbol for augmented is a plus sign. And then C to G, or F to C is a perfect fifth. We go to the next line of G to A is how far? That's a major second, of course. G to B, well, G is a whole step higher than F, B is a whole step higher than A. We move them the exact same distance, that's a major third. In G to C, reverts to 2.5 steps because B to C is a half step, to a perfect fourth. Minor second. And then as we saw above, sorry, that was a major second over here, and then this is a minor third. And then B to C would be a minor second or half step. So this is all well and good. Let's see how it changes when I make this into a minor scale that we're dealing with. We'll do a natural minor. Right, so when we turn this into a minor scale, something really interesting happens. We took the E to C, which was a minor sixth, and we dropped the bottom down by a half step. So what do you think that did? Made it a major sixth. Did the same thing with our minor third became a major third, and our minor second became a major second. Now, this didn't change the minor second at all, but it did make the major third. I'm sorry, it didn't change the major second at all, but it did make our major third, because we reduced it by a half step, into a minor third. Fourth and fifth stayed the same, But the sixth, the major sixth and major seventh, became minor sixth and minor seventh because we took the top note and dropped it by a half step. We shortened the size of the interval. Down here, this made our major second a minor second. Didn't affect this particular third, fourth. It did make this perfect fifth shorter. So now we have a diminished fifth, and I'm going to even make a little superscript on that so you can see what I mean by that. And the diminished fifth, a small circle, basically means that a minor or a perfect interval is reduced by a half step. So now we have the diminished fifth. It's also made our major sixth a minor sixth. It did not affect the minor seventh at all. If we do this, what was our minor second got expanded because the bottom dropped by a half step. Became a major second. Our minor third became a major third. Our fourth and fifth remained the same though, because when I dropped E flat, A flat, and B flat down, I transposed the entire structure down a half step, so they remain the same. And then our minor sixth became major sixth. In this one, our major third became a minor third. Our augmented fourth became a perfect fourth, and the perfect fifth stayed the same. Our major second here became a minor second. Major third became a minor third. This stayed as a major second because both notes were dropped a half step. The distance between them didn't change. Remember, intervals measure distance between. But this minor third, because this is now A flat here, became a major third. Now, keeping track of this can be a little bit hairy. I've created a sheet, and I will post it to the Moodle page. It's basically how to do this in a hurry. We'll talk in class about half steps, counting half steps to help intervals. I'm a little loath to do that a lot because then you get fixated on counting half steps instead of just getting the facility to look at an interval at sight and be able to tell me what it is. And this is really something that needs to be reflex. Pretty much everything in these first three modules needs to be reflex by not too long after you first learn about them. You need to be able to look at an interval or a chord or a scale or a key signature and just spit out exactly what it is. But I will post this up to the Moodle site so you can keep track of things. We will also talk about interval inversion as we go along here because that's a wonderful and fascinating topic. A lot of stuff happening this unit, so keep up on the reading, and if you have any questions, find me. Hope everyone has a great day.